Hi, I'm Mike Johns and this is Easy Stitching with Durkee Hoops. Today we're going to create an applique monogram onesie using the 5x9 or 125mm by 240mm Durkee hoop frame. We'll walk through this process step by step, and at the end you'll see how we wind up with these beautiful onesies. So for today's project, we're going to need a few simple items. We're going to need a baby's onesie of your color choice, a couple of different colors of thread. Now in this case I'm using a darker purple and a medium purple, a pre-wound bobbin, our 5x9 or 125mm by 240mm Durkee hoop frame that's specific to your machine. I use Baby Lock, so this one is specifically for our Baby Lock machine. Our design file, which I've got saved to a USB drive. We have two different types of stabilizer and then a finishing backing. We've got a tearaway, a fusible cutaway, and then this is something like a soft finishing that you put on the back of your design to keep it from scratching the baby whenever it's finished. I've got a pair of tweezers which will help remove that tearaway once we get to that point. A pair of offset or curved scissors. These will help if you're going to actually do your applique by hand. If you choose to use a cutting machine, which is what I've done in this example, you won't need them for that, but you will need them whenever you go to cut away your fusible stabilizer at the end of the process. And then last, of course, just a pair of regular snips as well. Once we get all of these things put together, we're going to go ahead and take and fuse our fusible no-show mesh to the inside of our garment. And then we're going to hoop that using both our tearaway, our fusible, and our onesie all on the hoop. And we'll be doing that next. As you can see, I've already ironed on our fusible no-show mesh to the back of our onesie. Now I've used a piece that's a lot bigger than what I actually have to have because my design is not quite as big as this. But I'd rather actually just go ahead and put a little extra on there so that I know that I'm getting good stabilization and I'm not going to stitch off of that stabilizer. We're going to remove all of the excess after the design is finished stitching. So if you choose to use a smaller piece, just make sure that you've got the measurement for your design and you've got your design perfectly centered once you get it lined up, because otherwise you'd be sewing off of that fusible stabilizer, and you don't want to do that because that'll give you puckering. So I'm going to turn my onesie right side out at this point. And I like to take my tearaway stabilizer, which if you notice is a little bit bigger than what my onesie is. That's just so that it actually covers my frame and gives me some extra sides there for the frame to grab on and make sure that it's well stabilized inside of the hoop itself. I'm going to take and just fold it kind of in half and slide it up inside of the onesie. And once I kind of get it where I want it, then I'll unfold it. Now I know for this particular onesie, my center mark is about 4 inches over from the side and 4 inches down from the collar. Or that's where I'd like the center of my design to be. So I'm going to take just a regular quilting grid ruler and just measure that 4x4 and give myself just a little bit of a pin reference here. Now you could definitely, if you have alignment features in your machine, which a lot of machines now do, you could definitely put an alignment sticker in the middle of that and use that to line it up. I'm going to take my outer hoop and slide it up into the onesie. Now I'm going to use my hoop to kind of eyeball where that falls. Okay. And I've loosened that bottom frame a lot so that I actually have plenty of extra space to slide this frame down in, because the one thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to stretch my knit fabric when I go to hoop it. So I'm pretty happy with that. I know how big my design is, and I know kind of if I have the center of my design here, it's going to fit with no problem. So at this point, I'm going to tighten my thumb screw. And if you notice, I did not pull at all on the fabric as I went in and hooped it. If you do pull it, you'll wind up getting puckering once you release the fabric because of the knit. And the knit has two-way stretch. Once I get that thumb drive or that thumb screw tightened, I'm going to take this over to the machine, and that's where we'll start up next. Okay, next we're going to load our frame onto our machine. Now, I like to actually do this so that my arm of my machine is going through the bottom of the onesie because I have more room than going through the neck. So that's how I've actually loaded the design on my machine as well, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So I'm coming in, I'm making sure that the frame is, or the bottom of the onesie is below that arm. I'm going to slide my hoop in and it locks. Now I'm going to remove my little pin here. Okay, so at this point we're going to load our design. Like I said at the beginning, I put my design on my thumb drive, so I'm going to load that into my thumb drive on my machine. Here's my design. I'm going to set it. And as I mentioned, I inserted this onesie with the bottom opening as what went first over the arm of the machine, so I need to make sure that my design is rotated to match that, which is easy to do. And I'm going to hit OK. Now this is applique, so I do need to throw in a couple of stops just so that my machine doesn't keep going. Some designs are pre-digitized with the stops in, but I actually digitized this design and did not add the stops, so I'm going to do it in my machine. I'm going to choose embroidery. I'm going to use my magic wand to tell it what I want to do as far as colors. I know that this is my actual heart-shaped design that's in the back, the scroll work. I'm going to do that off of the darker purple. So that's my color number 9 on my machine. And then this is my actual placement stitch for that applique portion of my monogram. I'm going to do that as 9 as well, just so that if anything does show, I want it to look like it belongs. And then this next piece, this is my actual tack down stitch for that applique piece. I'm going to do that in my finishing color, which is 10. And then of course the satin stitch for the applique, which is my finishing color 10 again. And I'm going to hit OK. Now at this point, the one thing that you do want to do is you want to make sure that you trace your design inside of your hoop. This is a secondary hoop, meaning that the machine does not recognize the size hoop that I have on here. So make sure that you go through and trace out your design to ensure that you have plenty of room around the head of the around the needle itself so that you don't hit the frame. This is what I mean by tracing your design. So I'm looking at my number 10 needle here. And I've got plenty of room as it goes around, and I know I'm not going to hit my frame. So once I've traced my design, we're ready to start the stitch out. Next, the machine will stitch out our placement stitch. As I mentioned, I actually used a cutting machine to pre-cut my applique, so I don't have to actually put a piece of fabric down at this point, but if I didn't pre-cut my applique, I would take and lay a piece of fabric down on top of my design that covered that placement stitching and let it go ahead and stitch the tack down stitch, and then come back and cut as close as I can to that tack down stitch so that it finishes the applique. But as I said, I went ahead and used my cutting machine, and we'll go ahead and put that cutout onto our fabric next. So here's our placement stitch that's been stitched out on our design, and then here's my pre-cut applique piece that I did with my machine. On the back I had a peel and stick wax coating that I have to get rid of, so I'm going to do that first. And then I'm just going to take and line up, using my placement stitch as my guide, line up my applique piece here. And as you can see, it covers up my placement stitch all the way around evenly. So now we'll go back to the machine and we'll let it stitch out the placement stitch, or the tack down stitch. So back in our machine, again, we're going to load this from the bottom so that we slide this over our arm. And on each side of our machine, these extensions actually just slide into our grips. Making sure that you lock it on both sides. Double check to make sure that that fabric is hanging freely beneath the arm. I also check just to make sure that up here at the top I don't have anything caught up in the mechanism as well. Once I know everything is aligned correctly, we can go ahead and start the next stitch, which will be our tack down stitch. You can see that that tack down stitch caught our fabric all the way around, and that's going to help hold that fabric down. Now there is a little loose stitch right here at the very beginning, but that's not going to matter because we're going to cover that up with our satin stitch in this final stitch, which we're going to do now. And our design is finished, so we'll unhoop, or we'll take the hoop off of our machine and we'll go to the table and we'll unhoop it and clean up the backing. Alright, so here's our finished project, which I think looks great. We're going to go ahead and take it and unhoop. To begin with, we're going to loosen our thumb screw. And then that top hoop will just slide right off. We'll remove the bottom hoop. And we're going to go ahead and turn our project inside out. Now, if you remember, we used 2 layers of stabilizer. We used the tearaway and we also used the fusible cutaway. So we're going to remove that tearaway first. We'll also take at this point and trim all of our thread ends. For the fusible, if you heat the fusible back up, the sticky on the back becomes pliable again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to my ironing surface and I'm actually going to heat this very lightly, pull this back and wind up cutting just about 1/4 of an inch around my entire design. As you can see, I've actually taken and trimmed away my cutaway fusible about 1/4 of an inch or so around from the entire thing. The last step in the project is we're going to take something like Cover Soft or Dreamweave. There's various products that this is for, but it's a backing that goes over the applique on the inside of the garment. And what it does is it protects the skin against all the bumps of the embroidery, especially where the knots are, where the machine tied off of our thread. This is a fusible product, so we'll go ahead and fuse that on, and I'll be right back with the finished product. Okay, we got that fused. We got our backing fused onto our garment. It's nice and smooth now, so it won't irritate the baby's skin. We'll turn our project right side out. And there you go, our finished project. I hope you've enjoyed this video as we've created this applique monogram onesie using the Durkee 5x9 or 125mm by 240mm Durkee frame. You can find more information about all of the available sizes in the Durkee frames at the website at www.dehoops.com. As a reminder, all of the Durkee hoops do come with a lifetime warranty, and each frame is specific to the machine brand that you own.